Hey, tenon makers. Alright, so I have the layout done for my tenons. I'm mounted into the bench at about the right height, and I've got lots of practice into the saw, again, using same material here. So I should be ready to go. So a couple of questions about how I'm going to start this, and I could start with cutting the top and the bottom of this tenon, or I could start with going the opposite direction and cutting the cheeks, or the long areas, the faces, or the face of the board, and that'll constitute the cheek. So I think for the purposes of this, I just want to get in and I want to start cutting down right to the top and the bottom, and I'm gonna cut these as close to that line as I possibly can, and possibly just a little bit under so. Because when I marked this out, it was awfully close, but maybe just a hair oversized. Okay, so a couple things to think about. I talked about where I like to start. I don't want to have the saw teeth resting on the end of the board running straight across. I'm going to tip this down a little bit using the end of the saw here for the best control. When I line up my cut to start, there's a couple things that I can do. The plate of the saw is one thickness, and that's great. But the teeth have something called a set. So we have teeth coming out to the left and to the right. The right I don't really care about because that's on the waist side. But the teeth on the left, those are going to start to cut into my my joint, the thing that I want to leave behind. So in thinking about how to make a cut, I always want to think about the set on the outside of these teeth here, and I don't want to line the plate of the blade into the line. It's those teeth I need to think about for getting into my cut. So in doing that, I'm going to use my thumb here to kind of pivot. Yeah, it's probably more comfortable this way, watching out for my hands in the back. The other thing I can do is I can start to tilt this blade until I see a straight line continuously through. So I'm looking at the outside edge here of this corner, and if I tilt this in such a way that it looks like in the reflection it bends down to a different trajectory or a different line, then I know that my saw is way out of square. If I go too far the other way, then that line will now go up, and that's wrong. If I have this in the right, correct orientation to my eye, this line will look like it goes continuously across into the reflection of that plate. And in doing that, that's kind of what I want to watch for. I'm going to the second line, second line. So I can't see the back, but I'm looking at the shoulder line here, and that's where I want to go. So first one is down, and that looks decent. Okay, I could cut the second one here, but now, because I'm right-handed, I'm staring at this side of the plate. I'd have to look over here and kind of tilt my body awkwardly to see that happen. So I'm going to flip this one around and revisit this whole thing. Sometimes I do this to set the board. I want to make sure that this is as close to plumb or truly vertical as I can, and that makes the position of this saw a little more comfortable in my hand. All right, round two. It's really tricky when you're cutting joinery. If you notice that that blade is going in the wrong path, there's really nothing you can do about it, because once those teeth are engaged and the plate of that blade is starting to cut, that is all there is to it. There's really not much more you can do. Alright, so this, I'm holding the workpiece in the right position here, but given where the jaw is at, it's starting to create more of a pinching effect here on these corners. So I've made this little gizmo that I can slip in there. I actually need to pull this out a bit more. And basically just creates a spacer so that when I'm clamping down my workpiece, this set of spacers will lock into position to give me, give those chocks a bit more of a parallel hold and so I'm not going to start damaging the wood or damaging my jaws. Okay, so same thing applies what I'm trying to do here, and I'm trying to get right on that line as best as I can. Just realized I'm blocking the camera. Sorry, camera. So, got some decent cuts all the way around, which look okay. Some people who are not terribly confident in what is the trickiest part of the cut is the start of that cut. Sometimes they do themselves a little favor and they create a little notch. So getting right up to that line there and then creating a bit of a recess. So I've cut something parallel to the line and an angled piece over on this side. And what that will afford is for this blade to kind of land right in that position, and so that blade won't bounce around, and it starts off going down a really good path. So that looks pretty decent, but I won't know how I did until I clear off some of this material and of course some of my bench. Talked about the difference between a ripping blade and a cross-cutting blade. And this one is a bit of a hybrid, so it does a bit of both, which makes life easier. But you can't see what I'm doing, can you? That's better. Alright, so for these faces, I think it's going to be easier to cut these out here. And I'm about maybe between 1/8 and 1/16 of an inch away from my shoulder line. I don't want to cut off any more material in here than will just clear that waste material in the cheek. If I start cutting into my tenon, I'm going to compromise a lot of that strength that the long grain affords. So I'm just doing this until I get in a position. I can do this with a bench hook here, but you'll see there's not a lot of support to hold the width of this. So for this one, I'm going to go back to the vise. And there I am. Cool. I just saw I'm running out of battery, so I better hurry. Alright, so decent there. Just a little snug there. That's not horrible. It would be so much cooler if this worked on the first try to get it into my mortise. A success. Cool. So, I don't want to focus on it. Cool. So I've got good capture, good fit on the cheeks. I don't need to clean this thing up. Little gap here on the bottom, which is totally cool because I'm going to show how to make a wedge tenon, so those gaps will fill up. But that is coming right off the saw to get a tenon. And I'm making, because I'm doing a proud tenon, Got a bit of an extension here, and I still need to clean up the shoulders to get to my knife line, which I'll do with a chisel. Cool. Thanks for watching.